Welcome back, everybody, to another breaking news edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill, coming to you on this Monday afternoon. Got the whole crew with us, Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk. And, fellas, we got a lot of recruiting to jump into. Georgia has continued to keep the recruiting trail hot, continuing to add commitments in the upcoming class and even the 2024 class, as we'll get into in a little bit. So a lot of this episode is going to be about recruiting. We're going to talk about Georgia's 3 most recent commits. We're going to talk about a big 5-star offensive tackle that's still looking at Georgia. And on the back end of this episode, we're going to talk about SEC Media Days. We learned on Monday which Georgia players are going to be in Dallas with Kirby Smart, talk a little bit about that, preview that, and also talk about a huge weekend for Georgia golf, a Georgia alum having an outstanding tournament, and make sure and give him his due there. But, guys, let's start with what we learned on Monday afternoon. Georgia picks up its second commitment of Monday. 4-star safety Jaylen Morgan commits to Georgia. A big win, the Rockville, Tennessee native. 4-star, looking at 6'1", 180, a big-time safety addition in the 2025 class. Based on what I had looked at before the announcement, I believe Georgia is still number 3 in the 2025 class rankings. But, Ben, tell us about Jaylen Morgan, what Georgia did to win out in this recruitment, and what the Bulldogs are getting in this really talented safety.
Well, yeah, I'll admit he made my heart jump a little bit. We've talked about this for a couple of weeks now, and I've been expecting Jaylen to be in Georgia's class for a couple of weeks, and we talked about it, and he's been one of my favorite. I've just put this on Dogs 24/7 before he hopped on here. He's one of my all-time favorite kids that I've covered in this business. Like I like the way he handles his business. But he did picked up the couple hats, and the Georgia hat was the second one that he picked up, and then he put it back down. So I didn't know if something weird had changed at the last hour, but no, he just had, a cooler Georgia hat to throw on and shirt and a Bulldog to bring out. So huge recruiting win for Georgia. We've talked a little bit in recent weeks recent episodes about if there's one position group that I maybe have more question marks at than others, it's defensive back. And we've seen that really come into picture a lot more clearly here over the last 24 hours. Jaylen Morgan, guy that could play safety, he could play star. I think that, there's going to be comparisons drawn to Javon Bullard. That's what Glenn Schumann compared him to when they were going through film study on his official visit. I think because of the way that he carries himself, I think the way that he, when he's going to be a media darling, should he ever get to the point that he's playing and Kirby wants to throw him out there to media. And I think that he'll have a lot of similarities to Javon Bullard there in terms of it's going to sound like you're listening to a Kirby Smart clone. But great football player, long, fast, can make a lot of plays. Instinctive, I think, is probably a word that's going to be used. Instincts are probably his biggest strength. And so really big recruiting win. And I think, Dante Williams, it's maybe taken a little bit for it to show itself in this class, but he clearly is making an impact. He was the lead recruiter on Jaylen Morgan. We'll talk a little bit more about Shamari Earls later in the episode, but he was a key piece in that one as well. And so you're starting to see the effects of Georgia had some defensive back position coach changes at the beginning of the year. It takes a little bit to get some of the footing and all of that. You're seeing the positive effects of that with Jaylen Morgan, with Shamari Earls. I think you're going to see some more positive news later this week too. So, trending in the right direction at DB with Dante Williams and Travaris Robinson.
Yeah, Ben dropped a little nugget there. Keep an eye out and remember that we got a sale going on over at Dogs 24/7, so you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. Want to make sure and shout out the people who are watching this live right now: Pastor Smith and Sacred Grove over on YouTube, Kevin Green on Facebook. We appreciate you guys tuning in because there's a lot to talk about, and this is a fun time of year because there's plenty to discuss. And Kipp, I'll throw it to you with Jaylen Morgan. What do you think of this addition for Georgia? And as Ben was sort of laying out there, it seems like in these the last couple of days, we have such a better understanding of what Georgia's secondary class is going to wind up looking like in the 2025 cycle.
Yeah, I think this is one of those where we have to go back and look and know that Travaris Robinson and Dante Williams were, recruiting Jaylen before they even got to Georgia. They have an established relationship with him. And we got to remember that with new coaches on board, trying to reset a position board, entire secondary board, I would imagine that there was more emphasis put on, what they see in camp and camp workouts at their positions really than anyone. And I just think that Jaylen's just one of those guys where, you look at the film film. And I mean, I think Ben's right. It's tough to not look and see a Javon Bullard, but it's also a guy that maybe has like Kamari Lassiter's size as well. So it's kind of like a good combination there. And when you have new coaches coming on staff for Kirby Smart, they still, his eval is still the one that, that's the final green light. So they're looking to see, what he's looking for in the secondary as well. So I just think Jaylen checks that box really for everything I've mentioned, and for what Kirby wants in his secondary, for what these guys like as well. So I think this cycle, you just have to look and go, these guys might have the rankings on these guys is all over the map. But I think that with Jaylen Morgan, it's one of those where they put their own eyes on him. They got their own eval. And I think Georgia's continuing to put a greater emphasis on that in-person eval with these guys. And I just think that Morgan's a guy that just really high on the board for Georgia, and a guy that I think in the end we're going to look back and go, it's just another, evaluation steal by this coaching staff as the secondary class, continues to fill out. And now, we could be looking at a DB group that is pretty much possibly, done in the next, week or so. And so that was like we were talking about, we didn't know where the DB board is, but I think that mystery is getting, pretty close to being solved completely for this cycle.
You brought up something interesting to me too, Kipp, like where these guys sort of fit on Georgia's board. And I'll say, when the contact period hit at the beginning of the year, one of the very first places that Dante Williams went was Rockville High School to get up, see Jaylen Morgan in person. He's obviously taken visits for junior days and spring practices, and he was going to have official visits, but they wanted to make sure that they got an early eval on him, and they certainly did. And I'll also say, this wasn't something I really thought about coming into this, but you look now, they got Jaylen Morgan in the fold. They have Jared Curtis in the 2026 class. They've got Stephon Shivers on the defensive line. I mean, Georgia's dipping its toe into the state of Tennessee in this recruiting cycle and next. And I think a lot gets made, obviously, of, because of the state of Georgia's talent pool, people coming into the state of Georgia. And you're going to see probably over the next week or so, a couple of guys from the state of Georgia ending up in Tennessee's class that people are going to say, wow, like this is, they're going into Georgia and stealing guys. And I think that, probably not enough gets made of Georgia's doing great evaluations of its border states as well. And I think that when they go in and they get a guy like Jaylen Morgan and they do a strong eval on it, I mean, I think that, typically that turns out pretty well for Georgia.
Very good point on that. And definitely a huge win with Georgia being able to get Jaylen Morgan. Also, shout out to Jimmy Thompson and Will Dickerson watching live on Facebook. Hey, keep the comments coming, y'all. We love to hear from y'all and want to shout y'all out as they come in and tune in on, again, what's been a very productive few days for Georgia. So, guys, let's turn our attention to what happened earlier on Monday, and that was three-star offensive tackle Jaw Jackson committing. And this is a huge commitment for a number of reasons, and also quite literally a huge commitment. 6'10", 340, a guy that's got a basketball background, sort of decided, hey, he's going to turn his attention to football instead. And the most interesting thing to me is he is in the 2024 class, which Ben, you reported, he's enrolled on Monday. I think he was in classes when it was announced that he was coming to Georgia. What can you tell us about Jaw Jackson and what Georgia is getting in this massive offensive lineman?
Well, one of the most fascinating prospects probably Georgia's ever brought in. I mean, I don't think there's any way to say whatsoever what you can truly expect from Jaw Jackson, whether that be immediately or when you look at the long term. But I think when you look at the potential and what he could project to, I think that's what appeals to Georgia so much. I mean, like you said, Jordan, we have him listed as a 3-star. It was probably the most impossible scouting job for our scouting department to ever have to do, because to your point, this isn't a football player. This is a guy that was a high-end high school basketball player, didn't go to college to play basketball, went the overtime elite route, played there for several years, won championships, was a big man, obviously 6'10", 300 plus pounds, very good basketball player, but probably didn't see the NBA upside the way that some people were telling him that there could be some NFL upside. And I think there's a lot of people that give bad guidance around this, the sports world. I think that Jaw Jackson is a great example of someone that probably got some really good advice, because I don't think averaging 12-7, being a 6'10", 300-pound guy that doesn't have much of a jump shot, he wasn't probably going to be able to carve out the type of NBA career that he might have, hoped for when he was Bronny James's AAU teammate, right? Like, there was a lot of, hype and expectation that I'm sure he had for his basketball career. And then you come in to your own and you realize you're self-aware. You realize, all right, maybe all these people telling me I should play football, all right, maybe it's something that I should look into a little bit more. And I think that he's got a great opportunity. I think that he and Georgia are the perfect match, because I think in many cases, if he goes to somewhere other than Georgia, I think that there's a lot of people expecting him to come in and play right away, be an impact offensive lineman from the start. That's not fair for a guy that hasn't been playing football for several years. And so I think that with Georgia, they know, all right, they had already brought in 6 dudes that are all, they're not 6'10", 350, but they're, in that ballpark, 6'7", 6'8", 330, 350. And so they already know, all right, our 2024 class has the bodies that would support if Jaw Jackson does not work out anyway. A lot of other schools wouldn't be able to afford that luxury. So they might have been a little bit more timid in saying, all right, we trust our evaluation that this is somebody that could come in and have high potential for us. Whereas Georgia I think that they felt much safer in doing so, because there's no real risk for Georgia if Jaw Jackson doesn't turn out. And then on the flip side of that, I think for him, he could have chosen a lot of different places that would theoretically be much easier for someone to transition from not having played football for several years to now trying to become, an NFL, SEC offensive tackle. And I think what he saw in Georgia was, one, to our point, the large humans that are already in the room. I've heard Jackson Cantwell, the 5-star from the 2026, talk to me about this. When you go to Georgia and you're 6'7", 330, and you see a bunch of other 6'7", 330 dudes around, you say, all right, this is a place that knows how to operate with people like me. Like, I feel like I would be stepping into a room that is similar to me. And I'm sure when Jaw Jackson went to Georgia compared to when he went to Florida State or Florida or any of the other number of places that he took a look at during this relatively brief recruiting process, he probably said, man, I look a lot more like these guys at Georgia, or in his case, these guys at Georgia look a lot more like me than everywhere else that I'm going. And so I think that it just makes a lot of sense for both sides. Is it going to work out? I don't know. I think that given the fact that he sees how difficult it is to be at Georgia, and that he still wants to put himself in that environment, he's coming into this knowing year one is a total redshirt year. Like, he realizes this is a year, and I say that, obviously he might be able to get some reps in situational circumstances or whatever. I saw somebody say today on our board that they should put him in on field goal block. That would be a genius idea as well. But for him, like, this is not a year that you have to go out and prove anything in game situations. This is a year where you go and you learn how to play football, from a place that you probably can learn to play offensive line better than anyone else. And so because of that, it makes a ton of sense. I think that it's a great pickup for Georgia, and I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. I mean, I truly believe this is a guy where it's like, I don't know if he'll be playing football in 2 years, because he wasn't playing football, 20 minutes ago. But I'm interested to see like what he can project too, because if Stacey Searles develops him the way that other guys have been developed at Georgia, I mean, this is a guy that could be a first-round pick strictly on his size and everything like that. But again, 6'10" is really tall. I'm interested to see like how that even looks on a football field. And like you said, Jordan, we're going to see it right away because he's already at Georgia.
Right. And Goat Dog on YouTube also said, hey, put him in on field goal block. I think that's an idea that a few people are coming around on. And Ben, you hit on the biggest thing to me. It's like, what does Georgia have to lose in this situation? Not very much. They had the spot for him in the 2024 class. He's a guy that, has a high upside. Bring him in and see if, he winds up fitting. And, I imagine they had another spot on the offensive line when Kelton Smith, had that medical DQ. It's like, hey, let's take this kid in. Let's see what we can do with him. And I'm sure that, Stacey Searles is licking his chops saying, let's see what this guy's got. And it may not happen right away. But Ben, like you said, they're not counting on him to play right away. And I think it would be a very different situation for both parties if that was the case. Kipp, what do you think of the addition? Getting a guy that not the background we are used to seeing with an offensive lineman at this level, but I mean, he seems like he's a guy that's got tremendous upside and got a chance in a few years to maybe develop into something special.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if we're playing football, he's easily number 7 on the list of 7 offensive linemen Georgia just brought in. Right now, if we're ranking just complete freakish upside, he's easily number 1 on the list of 7 of offensive linemen Georgia just brought in. It's, I bring up the example of Dan Skipper, who I know Stacey Sherrills is texting Sam Pittman and saying, I have a chance to one up you here. Sam Pittman coached Skipper at Arkansas, 6'10", 320 pounds, started almost 50 straight games at 3 different positions. He was left tackle, right tackle, guard, and is still playing, I believe, in the NFL. Got some starts the last couple of years of the Lions. You kind of look at that as the blueprint of a guy can be 6'10", 320, 330 pounds, and started offensive tackle in the SEC. I kind of look at Ja and see, left tackle athleticism. So I don't think there's a better fit for a redshirt player in college football right now than what Georgia just took in Ja Jackson here. I just think this is the perfect fit. He is about to learn, I mean, better than anyone, what it is like to play football in the SEC, having not played football for the last 4 years. I mean, it's the biggest jump possible. And, everyone, kind of bringing up, why not basketball? I actually think because he signed with Overtime Elite, he's not even eligible to play college basketball because he signed a pro contract. It's just kind of like when you play minor league baseball, you kind of have to just switch up the sports there. So the path all made sense for him. He knew he did not want to play overseas in basketball because I'm sure he would have been able to get a pro contract somewhere, whether it's Australia, Greece, somewhere. But, he just want to stay here. Can't blame him. Pretty great place to be, and staying in Georgia, being able to have an opportunity to just see what it takes. And if it doesn't work out, I mean, again, it's immediate eligibility. It's a transfer portal. It's a spot that Georgia can just replace. I kind of see this as backfilling a 2025 spot. Let's check back a year from now. See see how he looks a year from now. This is more like a 2025 class edition in my eyes. He's getting a chance just to try to get up to speed, see where he stacks up. But again, like I said, I look at Dan Skipper, and if he shows just even a base level of blocking ability in year 1, you definitely put him out there on field goal blocks, because Skipper had, I think he had 7 blocked field goals at Arkansas. He was close to the record. And so I think that's a guy where you try him out there in that field goal unit, see if you can get a block or 2 in those, those red shirt games, give him a taste of being out there. You don't put him out there in important situations early on, but you get him out there, see how he handles it. And it's just like all of these guys. You can't really predict what's going to happen when they get into this type of competition. That's the one part of the eval where you try to get as many data points as you can. It's almost impossible, but he's already played, a highly competitive sport. You have that, that he has rare bend, especially for a guy that's 6'10". That's why you look at him and say, this guy might be able to play left tackle, because he's not stiff at all. Usually once you surpass that 6'7", 6'8" mark, it's really tough to actually put these guys at offensive tackle. They end up playing guard, even though they have that kind of height. But I think he can play out there. And I just think, like I said, this is more looking towards next year, see what it looks like in a year. If you have a spot on the roster, Georgia's the only roster really in the country we can kind of put them in there at the end and see what happens. It's a lottery ticket on both ends. So I think it's a no-brainer for Georgia. And I just think it's interesting. The teams that convinced him to give football a try didn't have a chance once he got on campus at Georgia for that official visit. It was over at that point. So that's another situation where Kirby Smart just has a lot more brand equity than the other programs right now.
I will also add, Jordan, sorry to cut you off there. I apologize. But I wanted to clarify, just because we've been throwing out 6'10", and he measured in at 6'10" at Georgia. I want to clear up some misinformation. And by misinformation, I mean the graphic that I put out with my commitment story that said that he was 6'9". 6'10", 334 is what he measured in at Georgia. I can't remember exactly what his wingspan was, but it was like 85 plus. So this is a big human being that Georgia's working with here.
Yeah, like Kipp said, it's a lottery ticket for Georgia. Let's see what happens. 2024 will be a big year of development for him. And you know what practice we get to watch, I won't be surprised if we hear his name being called out. But that's what comes with it. You know, he's going to be developing and he's got a lot to learn. So it will be fascinating to see how he grows over this next year. Well, guys, last but not least, let's go back to Sunday. Georgia picking up a big flip, getting four-star cornerback Shamari Earls to flip his commitment from South Carolina to Georgia. 6'2", 180, big-time four-star corner. And again, as Ben was talking about a few minutes ago with Jaylen Morgan, you know, for a while it wasn't exactly clear what was happening with Georgia's defensive back board, you know, who they were going toward, what they were thinking. It seemed like Shamari Earls in these last few weeks had sort of separated himself and had become a big-time target for Georgia. Ben, what can you tell us about Shamari Earls, you know, his recruitment, why he picked Georgia, and what the Bulldogs are getting in him?
Well, again, like you said, four-star cornerback. I think that he'll stay a four-star cornerback and maybe a high-end four-star cornerback. But, I mean, he is everything that Georgia looks for from its defensive backs. And I think if you're pointing in this defensive back class and who Georgia is going to end up getting, and you're saying, like, who's the guy in this class? Like, I think that that's probably Shamari Earls. Like, when you look at past Georgia defense, I mean, last year's is maybe an outlier because they had 4 top 100 guys. So there were so many, but Shamari Earls, is someone that Georgia offered just before he committed to South Carolina in April. And so it didn't take as long to get to this point as it did with Andre Evans, but it reminds me a little bit of Andre Evans' recruitment last cycle, where Georgia offered right before Andre Evans committed to LSU in June, and they didn't have the opportunity to build the relationship with him in time to have Georgia be the choice the first time around. And the same sort of thing happened with Shamari Earls this year. Georgia offered, they had started to build that relationship, but they knew Shamari is going to be making his decision here in April, and Georgia knew they were not going to be able to win out in April because it had been too fresh. The relationship wasn't there. He had hardly even known or been to Athens at all. And so those next 2 months were really Georgia's window to kind of turn this thing around. And so they got him in on a spring practice visit. They obviously brought him in on the official visit. And, you know, I talked with Shamari last week about this when he essentially last Tuesday was about when Shamari had realized, all right, Georgia's going to be the choice here. He had kind of let South Carolina know. He had personally called Coach Beamer to let him know, like, all right, I'm probably not going to be coming to South Carolina, which I think South Carolina had fully been anticipating for a couple of weeks prior to that. But he wanted to have a couple of last conversations with both South Carolina and Michigan to really confirm his choice. And he said when he got off the phone with South Carolina and Michigan, he knew, all right, Georgia is the place for me. Dante Williams has done an incredible job with him. And so, again, 6'2", 205, I think is what he measured in at Georgia. I think we've got him listed at 6'2", 180, and so we'll get some more verified measurements before we update that on our side, obviously. But a guy that is big, he's fast, he's going to be a true cover corner. I mean, this is a guy that Kirby Smart is really going to love everything about him. And the feedback that I got on both him and Jaylen Morgan is obviously great kids, great families, and I think that the more that we get into this transfer portal era, I think that schools are going to be evaluating families as much as they're evaluating recruits these days, because I think that they know the people around recruits are so influential in their decisions to stick around or, ride it out for the long term or transfer early. And so I think that, the feedback that I've got on both of these is just, they really recruited the families in a big way on both of these. And I think that that paid off for both Jaylen Morgan and Shamari Earls. So I think 2 great pickups for Dante Williams.
You look at Shamari Earls, he was the indoor long jump state champion in Virginia. Very impressive. I mean, 6'2", 180 by itself at cornerback just absolutely stands out.
And I'll add, I don't know if this was I feel like it was probably not coincidental. I feel like Georgia might have been trying to add some salt to the wound. Georgia did throw out a new offer last night along the defensive line to a guy named Caleb Williams. He's from Virginia at a rival high school of Shamari Earls. They grew up together. They know each other. I talked with Caleb this morning. I'll have more about that on Dogs 24/7 in the morning. So definitely subscribe and check that out. But he's now, Shamari Earls was South Carolina's highest rated commitment. Caleb Williams is now South Carolina's highest rated commitment, and he's sniffing around, especially with Georgia with the new offer. And so, I feel like that was probably intentional on Georgia's part to grab that Shamari Earls flip and then offer Caleb Williams within an hour of that announcement.
Yeah, both guys had committed around South Carolina's spring game. So no love lost, I don't think, between Columbia and Athens right now. Kipp, what do you think of the Shamari Earls addition for Georgia? Again, a big piece that is very talented and, again, gives us a clearer picture on what exactly Georgia's trying to do in the secondary in 2025.
Well, the elite measurables that carries over to his track. I mean, he ran one 100-meter race in the spring, and it was a 10.8. He's an indoor state champion in the long jump, and I think it's one of the top 15, top 20 indoor long jumps in the country. A top 20-ish 55-meter as well. Right now, a guy that's 6'2", 205 pounds. I just think that if you're looking for a guy who has a chance to become an elite cornerback and then just possibly a top 5 cornerback prospect in this class heading into his senior season, he's ranked as the 8th cornerback in the country on 24/7 Sports. I think, the arrow's pointed up there with a chance for him to be in the top 5 when all is said and done. And, I think on the board, a couple people brought up Keely Ringo comps. I kind of want to brush back against that. Not that it's a wrong thing, obviously, because he's the iconic player for Georgia, but the main difference for me is just the fact that Keely played a lot of running back coming out of high school. And looking at Shamari Earls' film, I mean, he's playing wide receiver and cornerback. The ball skills are just completely apparent. And I'm not, again, going to try to put the expectation that he's already, a better prospect than Keely Ringo coming out of high school, because he was a freakish track athlete as well. I'm just saying, if I'm looking at an aspect of what Shamari Earls brings to the table that could potentially separate him, I think it is the ball skills in this scenario. And so you look at some other guys in the past, like a Patrick Surtain, like those guys had similar playing style coming out of high school, similar testing numbers, similar measurements. This shows that he has the potential to be, more of a lockdown cornerback at that size than a guy who's just a freakish athlete and big playing out there. So I just think the upside is there, but also he already has shown the ball skills to be, a real elite defensive back and cornerback in this class for Georgia.
Henry Dion, Anthony White, and Goat Dog always all saying that it's a great day to be a Georgia fan. Well, it always is, guys, especially when you're hanging out with us on the Junkyard Dawgcast. But no doubt about it, this has been a very productive, really 2 days for the Bulldogs, and I'm sure that there's plenty to come on the recruiting front as we go forward through the rest of the summer. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about a big commitment date set for a big-time Georgia target. We're going to talk a little bit about SEC Media Days in Dallas, and we're going to talk about a UGA golf alum really tearing it up over the weekend. Well, guys, as productive as the last few days have been for Georgia, there's still several big-time targets that are out there that the Bulldogs are chasing, and there may not be any bigger than five-star offensive tackle David Sanders. Sanders recently set his commitment date for August 17th. He's got Georgia among his top 4 schools, a guy that Georgia's been chasing for quite a while. And I'm going to start with you, Ben. What can you tell us about David's recruitment, and where do you think this thing is headed, knowing that we've still got a little bit over a month before he winds up making his decision?
Yeah, well, definitely someone Georgia's recruited longer, as long as anyone. You think about the names, Justice Terry, Elijah Griffin. Those would probably be the 2 that I would say would be up. Probably the only 2 that I would look at and be like, yeah, Georgia's been recruiting these guys as hard and as long as they've been recruiting David Sanders. He's been a top of the board type of guy for a really, really long time. They've tried to get him on every important monumental recruiting weekend that they could, junior days, scavenger hunt, official visits, game weekends, anything that they could do, they have tried. I feel like going into the last month of this recruitment, Georgia's probably on the outside looking in of that top 4. I mean, I think you brought it up, Jordan, when he dropped the top 4. People were probably a little surprised that Clemson was excluded from that top 4 in favor of Nebraska. But I think that it really had been those top 3 of Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee for a little while. And even Georgia had probably slipped from the pack a bit compared to Ohio State and Tennessee. I mean, I can't say definitively which one of those 2 I would lean towards. I mean, I think, I go back to my conversation that I had with David in September of last year. And at the time he said there were 2 schools clearly recruiting him and prioritizing him better than everyone else. And it was Georgia and it was Tennessee. And so from that standpoint, I think I would probably favor Tennessee. That said, I think Ohio State makes a little bit more sense to me for a lot of reasons in terms of what they've done with tackle productivity, though I know Tennessee's obviously had a first rounder of their own recently too. But what Ohio State's done with tackle productivity, it just feels like Ohio State is, at the pinnacle of college football along with Georgia, in my opinion. And so I feel like there's just a, prestige factor there that probably favors Ohio State over Tennessee right now. So I think I could see that one going either way. Now, that's not to say that I think Georgia's given up in this thing. I mean, I think that when you have been recruiting a guy like David Sanders, as long as you have, you're going to give it a fight. But you look at Georgia right now. I mean, they've already got a couple offensive linemen in the class. They've got Juan Gaston making a decision in August. They've got Nick Brooks from Iowa that is, maybe Georgia, maybe Texas, maybe USC. He's going to be making a decision probably at some point this summer as well. And then Damola Ejidahun, who's an in-state offensive lineman that I think has a lot of upside, that is still going through some of his decision-making process as well. But I think that Georgia's been in a good spot there coming out of his official visit too. So regardless of how things play out with David Sanders specifically, Georgia's in for another really, really good offensive line class. But there's no doubt about it, with the amount of time and resources that Georgia has put into David Sanders and his family at this point, they would love to bring him into the class. I just think that optimism is probably lower than it once was.
I think Ben mentioned this, but I want to make sure and say it's Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Nebraska as his final 4. And obviously got a little bit over a month before he makes a decision. Kipp, what do you make of the recruitment of David Sanders, Georgia fighting and pawing to try to be that final team? But as Ben explained, there's some teams that seem to be in really good position with a little bit over a month to go.
Well, my initial reaction is just that I don't think Matt Luke is finding it is easy to recruit at Clemson as maybe he thought it would be when he signed up. It seems like the difficulty level for him, I think he's playing his NCAA football 2025 at a All-American level, possibly Heisman recruiting for them right now. But I think, again, I don't think this one's going Georgia's way as of right now. And I think that they've already planned around it. As Ben said, he mentioned the other guys, and I just mentioned Jaw Jackson is basically a backfill. I mean, that's the way I took it. You're loading up on guys that fit physically the parameters of what you're looking for at offensive tackle. And, they recruited David Sanders heavily, did everything they could. Not going to win every recruitment. But at the end of the day, I think Georgia's filling its numbers at the position. And they're going to continue to, just continue to sign 5 to 7 offensive linemen a cycle. Then again, I think the evaluation points will win out in the end. Some of these guys will pan out, some won't, and some will transfer. And I think it's not the news Georgia fans might want as far as just 5 stars and the overall recruiting numbers dictate, but Georgia's got the number 3 class right now, early in July. We've already said multiple commitments are projected at offensive tackle and at other positions this month. So kudos to the teams that made the final group, including Georgia, but probably this is an Ohio State over Tennessee battle as of right now. And, that's the way it's going to be in the recruiting landscape these days. The elite talent overall is just going to be spread out amongst these teams. I don't know. Georgia and Ohio State are the teams that have been at the top of the recruiting rankings along with Alabama the last couple of years. So you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And I just think this is the one where I think the Buckeyes are probably going to win out in the end.
Ben, before we moved off of recruiting, I did want to bring up this question from Facebook from Jack Tillman. I want to know about Justice Terry, Elijah Griffin. Do we have a sense of their timeline when each of those guys are wanting to announce? I know that those are two of the bigger targets that are still out there for Georgia. What can you tell us about what they're looking at as far as timelines?
Well, that's a loaded question, Jack, because are you asking what they're saying their timeline is or what I think that their timeline will end up being? So as of right now, both of those guys would like to make signing day decisions. I think that Elijah Griffin has been very clear in that from the very beginning, and it's felt like all the schools recruiting him have been fully accepting of that. And I was just at his school 2 weeks ago. I even pressed I said, look, I realize I've asked you this 6 times now and I've been annoying about it, but like, do you think there's a scenario where you would move this thing up? And he was like, I'm really set on taking my official visits in the fall. And that's why schools like Georgia and others did not give him official visits in the summer, because I think they knew that he probably was likely to be a December signing day guy. And so I do still think that Elijah Griffin will sign in December. Now, Justice Terry, prior to him even decommitting from USC, was saying that he also thought that signing day would be the final decision point for him. Now, with him stepping off of his USC commitment, I think that there's a chance for that to change. I don't have an exact timeline in place for when Justice Terry would make a decision. Again, what he's saying publicly right now, he very much still plans to commit in December. But I know that a lot of the schools recruiting him are really pushing for him to make a decision sooner rather than later. And so I think that a lot of times that ends up dictating your timeline more than other things. So for fear of teasing Dogs 24/7 subscriptions too much, it is a great time to subscribe. And so I would encourage you to pick now as a time, because I think there's a lot of things like that we're getting intel on, by the minute every day.
Definitely. And I will shout out Ben because he's done an outstanding job. And I can tell you, anyone who's signed up in the last few months following Ben's recruiting coverage, that, they're getting their bang for their buck. And I would encourage everybody to jump on board with us, because it's starting to get busy and there's plenty to talk about. And it's only going to keep on, the ball's sort of rolling down the hill, and that snowball is getting bigger and bigger as we get ready for the start of the 2024 season. Speaking of the upcoming season, we learned on Monday which Georgia players will be in Dallas for SEC Media Days. It'll be quarterback Carson Beck, defensive lineman Michael Williams, and safety Malachi Starks, who will be joining Kirby Smart. They will take center stage next Tuesday, part of the 4-day event in Dallas. This will be the first time that the event has gone out to Texas with the Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners coming to the conference, really making a big deal about those additions. So, Kipp, I'm going to start with you. When you look specifically at the Georgia representatives, these 3 players, Kirby Smart as well, what are you looking for? What do you want to hear out of their time with the media? Is there anything in particular you are keeping an eye out for as they get a chance to talk and preview this upcoming season?
I mean, I think it's a combination of maybe the 3 most talented players Georgia's ever sent to media days, but also 3 guys that are going to say absolutely nothing at SEC Media Days. Like, I think these are the guys that, I guess they kind of go hand in hand when you're, at Georgia. You're well trained by the, the head football coach, Kirby Smart, and how to say a lot without saying anything. And so I think that, these guys, you're going to have to break through the crust a little bit and maybe ask a couple curveball questions. I'm sure Carson's going to get plenty, with social media. with, his offseason additions to the, his, whether it's cars, whether it's who he's been seen with, he's going to have some, I guess, some big headline grabbers, but overall, I want to hear, as far as Mykel Williams, how far are you in as far as your hybrid role? How comfortable are you? How excited are you that you're going to be utilized? How is he going to be the answer to Georgia's pass rush needs this season? And with Malachi, the baton has been handed, from the elite the safety play Georgia's had during its championship run. It's now he is the definite leader in that secondary. So, what is his leadership role been like? How is he taking these other defensive backs under his wing? And just, he's going to be looked upon to be maybe the biggest leader in the locker room on defense. And so I think that's kind of, you want to see that year 3, likely the last year for him. So it all has to come together, and just want to see where he is on that path, because he's had 2 outstanding seasons of football at Georgia, but I still think, there's still room for him to climb, and you're kind of looking to see if if he can take that next step and be arguably one of the most talented safeties to ever play at Georgia. So, and I look for him to have kind of a, with Kyle Hamilton and Notre Dame, like that's the kind of NFL prospect that Malachi Starks projects, like a top 15, top 20 pick in the draft. So I want to see, the steps he's taken to kind of leave his mark and his legacy at Georgia in what looks like his final season.
I was very much appreciating, Kipp, how you tight walked the part of the Carson Beck conversation. That was bravo. Well done with that piece. Ben, what are you looking for out of media days when it comes to Georgia? What do you want to hear? What intrigues you the most about what Kirby Smart's going to go up there and say, and also what these 3 players will have to say as well?
Well, for starters, Kipp, you're usually better at this stuff than me. Where is Malachi going in current mocks, 25 mocks? Any idea?
I think that right now he's on the back end he's in that 18 to 20 range. I think right now, given the safety position, it's tough for you to get and crack the top 10 these days. But I think for him, the ceiling's probably, like I said, like Kyle Hamilton, the early teens is where, he's got the potential to go in next year's draft. So if I was projecting, I would say he's probably going to go, I'll say 14th. That's where I would have him on my official big board right now on July 8th.
Well, and I bring that up, and I've said this to both of you. I don't have the historical records of all the teams and who they've brought, but I can't imagine there have been many SEC Media Days iterations where teams have brought 3 guys that could end up being top 15 picks, let alone, top, or at worst, maybe top first round picks. Now, a lot of that is dependent on, injuries, how their seasons go. Obviously, Carson Beck has to, have a little bit of a prove it year to solidify that sort of QB1 stock that he kind of has right now. But I just think you look at some SEC Media Days groups that Georgia has brought and that other teams bring. A lot of times it's your media savvy guys. A lot of times there's other reasons why you bring folks. And I think it's a good sign for Georgia's season that the people that you feel comfortable bringing to SEC Media Days also happen to be 3 guys that might be projected to be top 15 picks. And I think that means you've got leadership in the right places. I think that it means that your best players are the people that have bought in to the culture and the system and all of that. And so I think, it's probably stupid to read too much into SEC Media Days and what it means for a football season. But when you really look at it and you say, man, Georgia's got Carson Beck, Mykel Williams, and Malachi Starks coming to Media Days, I mean, that it pops, it stands out. There's so many years where you look and you say, oh, okay, it makes sense that, a team brought this guy because he's good with a microphone in his, in front of him, but, maybe he's not an All-American type of guy. Georgia's bringing 3 guys that could be All-Americans to this. And I think that, says a lot about where the program is, but also says a lot about who their leaders are. I think the thing I'm most fascinated by with SEC Media Days is probably just whatever Kirby Smart has adopted as Georgia's mantra for the year. We know that there's something. We know that he will have learned something from how last season went, and that he will have probably studied for hours on end, something this offseason that we had no idea that he's been, using his few free hours that he has in a day to, last year it was, New Zealand rugby. Who knows what it's going to be this offseason, but I'm sure that he will be talking to thousands of reporters while really just talking to his football team about something that's important to him and that he thinks should be the message to be sent for Georgia's football team. And, fans eat that stuff up too. So, fans are going to love whatever it is that Kirby came up with this offseason. But aside from that, I mean, obviously the Texas and Oklahoma thing, you're going to be out there, Jordan. I'm sure you're going to be, every single station, individual player station is going to be 1,000 Texas reporters asking about what it means to be in the league with Texas now. So I'm sure you'll have a field day with that one out there.
Guys, should I get a 10-gallon hat? Should I be rocking the 10-gallon hat while I'm going to from table to table doing the interviews?
Yeah, you should. And you should also probably any provocative thing that anybody, some Georgia related or anything says about Texas, you should probably write about that too, because the Texas fans, we need the Texas fans to help bump our numbers up, because I know that that's why everybody brought them into the SEC, right?
Oh, totally. I wanted to piggyback on a couple things that Ben said just then, and the first one is the three players that Georgia's bringing. Not only are they arguably Georgia's three best players, but to me it says something that Kirby Smart and the coaches, they trust these guys to go out there and represent Georgia well, and I think you would say that for anyone who's interviewed any of these three guys. But yeah, sometimes it's kind of a ho-hum group that any team sends to media days, and a lot of the time, when I was kind of scrolling through the list of teams this year, what always catches my eyes, like when someone doesn't send a quarterback, especially when like we all know they have a guy, they don't have a competition. But no, I thought it was interesting that, Georgia sent these three guys, and Kipp hit on the big one for me. The biggest thing between these three is just hearing more from Michael, because, I listed him in our story as a defensive lineman, and, we're still waiting to see how much is he going to be standing up? What does that hybrid role really look like? So to hear a little bit more from Michael going through the offseason, I think is going to be really big. And then the other thing to me, Ben brought up a good point with what exactly, what motto is Kirby going to go with? I went and looked it up because I knew that there was something from the spring. He had really used assume nothing, which was something from Nike, from Phil Knight. Let's see if that's what they're rolling with. Is that, what has worked well enough within the building? Is that the one he rolls out there? Or have they been workshopping it? Do they have something else in the mix they're going to roll out and let us see on Tuesday?
Maybe it's his underlying battle with Dan Lanning. He's going to try and get in with Nike. He's going to try and be Nike's go-to over Oregon. That must be it. I think you nailed it.
Yeah, can't wait to watch. And I would make sure and tell people, as Ben mentioned, I'm going to be there all week, so I'll have a lot of content Georgia related from the different teams. And planning on Tuesday at some point, I believe Georgia's going to go early Tuesday morning. So once we wrap up, hopefully do a podcast sort of recapping what we learned and what we've seen to that point in media days and what we're looking for from the days to come. Guys, let's have a quick Georgia men's golf minute. Davis Thompson put on a show at the John Deere Classic over the weekend, finished 28 under to capture his first PGA Tour victory. Huge win for the former Georgia Bulldog, who was also the SEC Golfer of the Year at one point while he was playing in Athens. Ben, I think you're the resident golf expert between the three of us. What do you think? 28 under. That feels like something out of a video game. What a performance from Davis Thompson.
Yeah, probably the first of many for Davis Thompson. I mean, he's kind of been the child golf prodigy for a long time now. I mean, we were talking about this before we got on. I remember when I was covering Auburn, there was always talk about this local guy at Lee Scott Academy that's going to be the next big thing, and everybody was stunned when he ended up going to Georgia. And I know I have some roots in the Brunswick St. Simons area, and he trains out of there. And I've know a lot of people down there that speak so highly of him and think that he's, got this, major championship type of potential. And then obviously being a Georgia guy. And I can't believe that I've never crossed paths with Davis Thompson at any point during his career. But here we are talking about him on this podcast. And I think it's probably not the last time that we talk about Davis Thompson winning a golf tournament, because again, when you're winning PGA Tour events, even if it's a little bit of a watered down field this past week, you win PGA Tour event by 4 strokes. You have the potential to kind of run away with any golf tournament. And so, it's going 28 under is pretty impressive. And again, I feel like there maybe has been a little bit of the old guard of Georgia golfers, the Kevin Kisners. Obviously, Brian Harmon just won last year, so he's sort of, keeping things alive for that old guard as well. But you look at Davis Thompson, you look at Sepp Straka. I think it's really the new age Georgia. Those are the new age Georgia guys that are probably going to be in contention for these big tournaments going forward.
Yeah, to your point, Ben, I'm sort of in the same boat as you when it comes to, I can't believe I've never crossed paths with Davis Thompson because he went to Lee Scott Academy and I covered high school athletics around Auburn, Alabama for several years. I think I just missed Davis Thompson. I think he had graduated by the time he left Lee Scott, but man, what an outstanding performance. Kipp, what do you think about Davis Thompson? Like Ben just pointed out, Georgia's put out some great professional golfers and he looks like he is very well in line to join them.
My reaction is it's an unbelievable accomplishment. Having 0 golf skills myself, I just tip my hat to him. I mean, it's a great way to, jumpstart your career. I think it was like a $1.5 million payday for that. So I think the thing that just kind of stood out and reminded me, like, I won't ever be playing golf in any competitive fashion is the fact that there were almost 20 guys that were like under 20 or better. No. The only negatives I see are the transactions out of my bank account and, me finding out if I have overdraft fees or not every other month. So I don't think I'll ever, be competitive or maybe even golfing in a public setting. So it's incredibly impressive. And also maybe a curveball. I think we may have had like some small breaking news during the middle of the podcast. I got an email and I wanted to throw it to you guys if you're surprised or not. I got an email from the collective that they're allowing the people that are part of the Classic City Collective to attend Georgia's football practice on Sunday, August the 4th. And I didn't know Georgia practicing on a Sunday seems to be interesting. But I think we had talked about this before early in the year, whether Kirby Smart would open up the practice more, whether they would make that part of the NIL. And I think the overall thought was like fat chance that he would do it on the message board. But now they're allowing the Classic City people to attend. I think the first level gets you 2 tickets. Second level gets you 5 tickets to attend the practice. So do you think this is going to be a 2-hour-long yoga session, or are you surprised by that, or am I just reading really old news here? I just thought that was something interesting that I saw.
My thought would be that Kirby is going to do it, but do it through gritted teeth. And this, I feel like this is one of those like one-time things. And I will say this, I can see them being more willing to open this up in fall camp. They would never do this like the week leading up to the Clemson game. So I am definitely surprised, like you said, Kipp, but you do it, the start of August, we don't even know who half these guys who are going to be starting are. If you're going to do it, I think you could do it. Then, I'm honestly kind of surprised they didn't just do it in spring practice. I mean, as much as we, take a lot from what we see and what we learn, there's going to be a million things that change between spring practice and the start of the season. So I get why they're doing it, when they did it or when they are going to do it. But I'm sure Kirby's not exactly thrilled by it. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with Kipp. What are they going to show? Are they going to be allowed to have these are the media questions I got to ask. Are they going to be allowed to have video cameras out at practice? Because we don't get to have video cameras out at practice. So do I need to, infiltrate the Classic City Collective donors to, I don't know. This is all news to me. My wheels are spinning. My reporter brain's going. So Kipp, just let the listeners get a live look into how my brain operates, because I don't know. I want to see how this plays out.
We may have to turn this recording off and have a team meeting. We got some big things to decide. I do want to say this too, because this is going to be one of the last times we record before this happens. Guys, 8 days until the college football game comes out. I'll start with you, Ben. How you feeling? You ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we've talked about this already that I'm not a huge gamer, so I don't have, and like this is a game that I'm going to play pretty religiously whenever I can find the time to, but I got to get the new system. So I've been waiting for this week basically because Walmart, Best Buy, Target, Prime Day is coming up. So I'm trying to, sneak out the best deal I can this week before the game comes out. And so, yeah, this is a big week for me on multiple fronts because not only am I looking forward to the game, I've got to figure out how to get a console to actually play it.
Ben, I'll give extend an olive branch to you if you need to game on my system and wait on a better deal. We're both in Athens. It wouldn't be too far of a drive. You could swing by and knock out your games.
No, this is the week, man. I had my alarm set for this evening for the Walmart and Best Buy deals that opened up. So we're good. We're good.
Kipp, how about you? You ready to roll? Get ready for this game to either download or hit the shelves and get ready to play?
That is kind of the one conundrum, that physical disc copy. That's like the, that is the endorphin you need after a decade of not being able to play. But there is something about just hitting that download button and having it pre-downloaded as well. So there's kind of pros and cons for both. I think, I don't know what console you guys are going to be rocking with. It sounds like Ben is still a free agent and considering his options there. I'm a PS5 guy, so, I'll be ready to roll out there. And I don't know, how many games I'll have played or how many seasons I've played before I flip that thing to online, but I'm ready. I mean, it's I've seen all the ratings and I'm trying to figure out, the worst roster possible to start with. And I think I'm just waiting for, all the ratings to come out, and then you click that sort button and then that's it. You get, that's the team everyone's probably going to be playing with. So yeah, I'm pumped. I don't know how productive the country will be, especially in the Southeast. I think it's, you got a couple more days left to kind of crank it up. It's early in the month. You want to hit all those numbers and quotas for the month so that, once the game comes out, they kind of can't see you trailing off there for the last couple of days of the month. That's kind of the key there, especially, even the timing of this, fall practice for Georgia, it feels like you're kind of going to be up against it with being in year 5 of the dynasty and Georgia's first practice. But hey, these are good problems to have and something that we've never really been able to discuss as far as the podcast. But if we're not looking at the screen, on the the next pod, it's because we're probably getting smoked by a random 6-year-old kid who probably played the game somehow before us during beta testing for 48 hours and already has his playbook mapped out.
Yeah, there's going to be people leaving comments like, man, I didn't realize that the guys on Junkyard Dawgcast, they've started swearing a lot more during their podcast than ever before. I can't believe that. I will say something that I'm really proud of being on in the Junkyard on the message board. I'm seeing a ton of questions from people on the board saying, hey, which system do I need? Hey, guys, give me some advice. What should I do? I mean, people are taking this so seriously. It makes my heart so happy. And I'll be honest, I think Media Days, man, this has come up at the perfect time for me because I'm going to work through that Media Days. I'm going to write a few stories to go into the weekend. And then, brother, unless something crazy happens and there's breaking news, y'all don't call me this next weekend. Don't text me. Don't do anything. You're not going to hear from me unless something catastrophic has happened. I'm hunkered down, man. I'm playing this game, and I don't know how much sleep I'm going to get, but I'm going to have fun doing it. I can promise you that. Well, we are going to wrap up the episode right there. I appreciate everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Thanks to everyone commenting as this episode was going. Great to shout you guys out, and we appreciate you guys tuning in for sure. Like Ben has talked about several times on this episode, go subscribe to Dogs 24/7. Got a flash sale going on right now. You guys need to take advantage of it because, again, this is a super important time in recruiting, And again, next week, we're going to have a lot of intel just with the team and with what Kirby Smart and those three players have to say. So I can't encourage you guys enough to go to Dogs 24/7 and go subscribe. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube to Dogs 24/7. You will get all of these podcast episodes. You'll get video from Dallas. Once we get into the season, you'll get Kirby Smart press conferences and player interviews as well. And go check out Dogs 247 on TikTok, because we're going to have a lot of content coming out of the next few days. And again, next week in Dallas, as we continue the countdown to the start of the 2024 season. So for Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.